In this video, we'll be covering the cam side of the 3-axis Pro example. So the first thing we need to do is start a new cam job. So there's two ways of getting into there. You can right click on cam defaults and go to new job, or go to modules and click new cam job. Then we're going to choose whether we're milling, turning, wire EDM, or nesting. In this case, we're going to use milling. And then we're going to come down here and pick our machine. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the BC3X mill. Then we'll go right into the stock wizard. So we'll click stock wizard. We're going to choose rectangular stock and then hit next. And now I'm using a bounding box, so it's taking the overall shape of this geometry that I have and creating a bounding box around it, auto from the workspace. And then I'll go ahead and hit next. And this is our steps to set up our origin for machining, so our work offset for machining. So we're going to go ahead and click origin, and I'm going to put it on the top of part, top left-hand corner of the part. And then after you select it, you don't have to hit OK or do anything. The next thing we'll see is our work offset. So our work offset, we're going to put this in here. This is for the guys that have the full machine simulation to locate this part on the machine so it doesn't show up inside the table. So I'm going to go ahead and say minus 3.25. And then in Y, we're going to say 2.25. And then in Z, we're going to go 4 inches high so that it sits up above that table in the correct position. And then we'll just hit OK. And then over here's our clearance plane. I'm not going to make any changes to that, so we'll just hit OK. Now the first thing we need to do is go and set up our material. So we're going to right click on where it says either carbon steel or whatever shows up right underneath milling stock, and then say edit. In this case, I'm going to go to aluminum and just scroll down, and I'm just going to pick something like a wrought aluminum. We'll say 6061 and just hit OK, and that's going to change it. Now this controls our speeds and feeds, so when we go through these tool paths, when we get to the tooling page, the speeds and feeds are going to be pulled off of that material. So we're going to right click on machine setup, go down to mill 3-axis. We're going to select our geometry, and for 3-axis parts, we're usually going to select the entire part. And then if we want to use something to contain the tool to a specific area, we're going to use a boundary. In this case, we're not using any boundary, so we're going to go ahead and hit next, and then say next again. And then for our tool path, on this pass we're going to be running 2 roughing passes. One's going to be a normal advanced rough, and then the second one is going to be an advanced rough with a rest rough. So I'm going to just go down here and click advanced rough, and then click this arrow to move it over so that we have 2 advanced roughs. Then we'll hit next. Nothing to change here, we're not changing the work offset. We're going to use our G54, go next, and then we have to go set up our tools. So we're going to go up to our tool crib, go over to end mill rough, and then click add from tool library. We're going to sort by the diameter and then go down and choose our standard length 3/4 inch flat tool, and then just hit OK once and then hit OK again, and it's going to place that tool in there. Now all our speeds and feeds over here are set up off that material, so we're not going to make any changes to this. If we need to go in and change it, you can just uncheck use system feeds and speeds and make any changes that you need. So then we'll hit next. Our cut patterns, we're not going to make any changes here. We're using an offset, we're going to zig, and we're going to climb mill. And then for our depth of cut for cutting this, we're going to enter a value of 0.375 and a step over amount of 0.2 with 2 intermediate steps in between each cut. So each pass that this takes at its normal depth of cut, it's going to come through again at the end and clean up all the steps that are left with 2 passes. So it's going to make those steps a little bit smaller. And then for our allowance in XYZ, we're going to change this to 0.04 and then just hit next. We're going to ramp into the part using automatic, and we're going to leave our ramp length at 0.25, and we're using a center cutting tool, so we're going to make sure this is checked on. So then we'll go ahead and hit next. Rest roughing, that's going to be for the second option, so we're not going to do anything to this page. Go next. And then for our links on the first advanced rough, we want to use an S-link and a rapid retract for any large gaps. And then go ahead and hit next again. And now we're going to go up to our tool crib and then go to end mill rough and then add from tool library. And then we're going to sort by the diameter and go down. We're going to choose our 1/2 inch flat end mill with the standard size. So we'll just hit OK and then hit OK again. And then the only thing we're going to do is come in and change the protrusion length. Any of this information in here is editable after you pick this tool, and we're going to go ahead and make our protrusion length 1.5 and then go ahead and hit next. Our patterns, again, we're not going to make any changes there, so we'll hit next again. And for this depth of cut and step over, we're just going to use the defaults. We're not adding any number of intermediate steps, but we do want to use the same XYZ allowance because this is still a roughing pass. So we're going to say 0.04 and then go ahead and hit next. We're going to ramp again. And on this one, our ramp length we'll say is 0.2 because we're just using that 1/2 inch tool. And then hit next again. This is the option where we're going to add that rest roughing in. So we're going to say rest roughing. We're going to use the previous operation so it automatically pulls up the previous tool. And then we'll hit next. And on this one again, we're going to do an S-link with a rapid retract for large gaps. And then just hit compute. So then after the toolpath finishes computing and we see it on our model, we're going to come up here into our cam tree, right click on milling stock and just say blank. And then I could go down to my machine setup and right click on that and go down to blank on blank toolpath. I'm just turning that off for now. That way we can see these individually by just clicking on the advanced rough, and I'm going to see all the cuts for that advanced rough. And then I click on the advanced rough 1, or if we wanted to rename it, we can right click and say rename advanced rough 1, get rid of the 1 and say rest rough. So we know the difference between the two. So then we click on either of these and we can see just those tool paths being processed. So we'll see that rest rough is going into the areas where this previous tool couldn't clean up very well, so it's going in and fitting into those smaller areas and just giving us a much cleaner cut. Let's go check this out in the simulation. So we're going to go up to modules and then simulation, and then when the simulation loads up you can go ahead and click this button right here to turn the tool path off, and then we'll just hit play and we're just going to see the tool zip around the part, and we're moving pretty quickly. You could slow yours down by just using this slider bar here. And then we want to pay attention to these large grooves here because you're going to see they get cut in half. Those are the intermediate steps, each one of those as it was working its way around. And now we're doing our rest rough and we're all done. So that's the roughing pass. Now let's go add some finishing passes to that. So we're going to exit out of the simulation. Instead of adding another set of tool paths, so we have another feature 3-axis, we're just going to right click on our first feature 3-axis, say edit, and then we're going to go straight to the machining strategy page. Now on this, I'm going to click on the advanced rough, rest rough that I renamed, and then go down. We're going to add an advanced Z-level finish and an advanced planer. So those two tool paths, we're going to add them to the list. Make sure you're on the bottom one when you move it over, otherwise you'll have to move things up and down. And then just hit next one time, and now you'll see the tree gets populated with all those tool paths. So then I'm going to go to my advanced Z-level finish, and then we're going to go up to our tool crib. And this time we're going to click on end mill finish and then click add from tool library. We're going to sort by our diameter again, and this time we're going to pick our 1/2 inch ball end mill. So then we'll click that, hit OK once, hit OK again, and now we have our tool set up. So if I wanted to, I could come in and change my protrusion length to 1.5 to match the other tool, and then hit next. We're going to start cutting from the top. We're going to be zigging around and we're climb milling when we cut. So we're going to go ahead and just hit next. Our depth of cut on this, because we saved 40 thousandths before, we're just going to set our depth of cut for 40 thousandths and then just hit next. And then for our leads, we're going to go ahead and plunge on the entry, but we're going to have parallel lead-ins and the length of which are going to be 0.3. So if I just click out of that box, we'll see we're going to use the same lead-in and the same lead-out, and it says same as lead-in, so it's going to select that for us automatically. Then we'll go ahead and hit next. For this one, we're not changing the boundaries because we don't have any boundaries. We're not rest finishing, but we are going to use the angle range. The angle range allows us to only machine between a specific angle. So in this case, our angle range, our start is going to be 45 degrees and our end is going to be 90 degrees. So we're only going to cut things between 45 and 90 degrees. So that's all we need to change there. So we'll hit next. And then our links, we're going to go ahead and just use the default. So then we'll hit next. Our tool for our finishing pass on our advanced planer, we're going to go up to tool crib, click on end mill finish, and we're just going to choose the same tool we used before, and then hit OK, and then hit next. And for our cut pattern, we're just going to zig around the part, lace angle at 90 degrees starting from the lower left corner, and then hit next. Our step over again, we're going to put as 0.04. No other changes here. Our allowance is going to stay at 0 because we're finishing now, so then we'll hit next. For our leads, we're going to choose a vertical tangent, and then for the radius, we're going to put in 0.1, and then the angle we're going to say is 45 degrees. So then we'll go ahead and hit next again. And then again, we're not going to set up any boundary limits or anything. We're going to go in and set up an angle range. For the angle range this time, we're going to start our angle at 0, and we're going to end it at 45. So we get that overlap between these two tool paths in between this part. So then we're going to go ahead and hit next. We're not going to change anything on the links. And then this time, instead of hitting compute, we're going to say finish. If we hit compute, it's going to recompute all the tool paths that are already done. So we're just going to right click on advanced Z-level finish and then compute it. And then after that one finishes computing, we're going to right click on advanced planar and compute that one. So then after we have all our toolpath computed, let's go ahead and blank out our advanced Z-level by clicking blank, and then right click on advanced planar and blank that one out as well. That way we can go through, we have our advanced rough, we have our rest rough, we have our Z-level finish, and we have our advanced planar. Now one thing I'm seeing automatically is that this is cutting across the top of the part, and I don't want it to cut that angle. So what I'm going to do is right click on feature 3 axis and say edit, and then go down to my parameters on my advanced planar. And then I'm going to set my top of job as minus 0.5. That way it's starting a ½ inch down. So then I'm going to go ahead and finish my part, right click on advanced planar again, and hit compute. So now when it finishes computing, we only get the toolpath down inside all these crevices. So I see my advanced Z-level finish, which is cutting from 45 to 90 degrees, and then my advanced planar, which is cutting from 0 to 45 to clean up the rest. So let's go ahead and check this out in simulation. So again, we're going to turn off our toolpath right here by clicking that button. And then on this one, we're going to skip through the advanced rough and the rest rough that we've already watched. So I'm just going to go to Op 3 on my Move List tab. And then when we hit play from here, now all we're going to do is see the finishing passes of everything. So we're just going to see this rip around the part. Now this is again only going from 45 to 90, so it's leaving these steps in here. And then it's going to come back in and do our planar toolpath to clean everything else up right here. Speed it up a little bit. So then we can turn off the tool to see the finished product. And there we go. So we have the part in the simulation. So the last thing we need to do is just go clean up all these radiuses one time. So what we're going to do is right click on our feature 3 axis again. We're going to say edit, go to the machining strategy, click on the bottom toolpath that we already have, and then what we're going to do is add a pencil mill. So we're going to click pencil and then just move it over on this list. And then we're going to go ahead and just hit next. It's going to repopulate that tree. So I'm going to move this down and click on my pencil, my rough tool for this. I'm going to go up to my tool crib. I'm going to click on end mill finish and then say add from tool library. And then we're going to sort by the diameter. We're going to choose the 0.375 ball end mill and then just hit OK and then hit OK. So now we have that tool set up in there. So we'll hit next. There's really not many options for pencil mill. It's just going to go in and clean up all these corners. So our patterns are going to be whatever it chooses. Click next. No changes on this page. We'll hit next again. The only thing we want to do with this is make parallel lead-ins with a length of 0.25. Hit next. No changes here. We're cutting all our angles. Hit next. And then our leads, we're just going to have it follow. So we can go ahead and just finish this and then right click on pencil and compute it. So then you'll see just very small tool paths in here. It's just coming in and cleaning up all these radiuses. So we'll go ahead and blank that one out, and that way we can click on it and just see it when we want. And then we'll do one final run through of our simulation. So we're going to load this up. And then again, we'll just turn off the tool path. This time I'm going to skip down in my move list down to the pencil mill. So it's going to load everything up until the pencil mill. We're not going to see that cut yet. So then just let it load. And then we can go ahead and hit play and see what that pencil mill is going to do for us. So it's going in and just really fast cleaning up those corners. And then what we're going to do is go to our analysis tab down here. Be careful, there's 2 analysis tabs. Make sure you're on the analysis tab that shows all these operations in here when you click the drop down. We're going to go to deviation. And for this, we're going to say our gradient minimum, we're going to set to minus 0.03. And then our gradient maximum is going to be 0.03. And then we're going to click this button here for the min-max detection. We're just going to click that. And then we're just going to refresh the model using this button right here. So we're going to refresh it, and it's going to show up with a whole bunch of these colors. So then we can go in and see what's cut to size and what areas are off a little bit. So you'll see all your tolerances here coming around the part, all the areas that may need a little bit more work. So then we can close out of that. And then for our final toolpath, we're going to go ahead and add these drilled holes in here. So we're going to right click on machine setup, go to mill drill hole. So then we're going to go ahead and select our geometry. We're just going to pick the top edge of each one of these holes. So just like this, come over here and grab these guys. And just work your way around the part till you get all the holes. And then hit OK. And then for our larger holes, we're going to go ahead and say pick bottom. And if we made our model correctly, we should be able to come in and just pick the bottom edge of that hole, and it's going to give us our total depth. And then for our smaller holes, we're going to say pick bottom on these ones, and then just pick the inside of that. And we're cutting down to that 1/2 inch. So then we'll go next, next. I'm going to do a center drill and a drill for each one of these. So I'll go next, next. For our center drill, I'm going to just use the default tool and then the default parameters. And then for our drill, I'm also going to use the default tool with the default parameters. Except on this one, let's go ahead and peck. So we're going to go ahead and override our peck and make it an 1/8 inch for the first peck and an 1/8 inch for the last peck. And then go next. Next, our machining strategy for this one, we're going to do a hole. So it's a center drill and a drill. And again, just using the defaults. And then all the defaults, and then this one we won't peck on, and we'll just go ahead and hit compute, and now we have all the drilling as well. So then if we right click on our mill drill holes, blank that out and that out, that way we can come in and see just the center drills and then just the drills. And then be sure you go in, always put your work back into your isometric view by hitting Control-7 and then F on your keyboard to fit all. And then remember to save your part when you're all done. And that concludes the cam side of the 3-Axis Pro example.